Okay, the meeting is being recorded. So welcome to our workshop, Wearable Enhanced Learning in Support of Sustainable Development. The organizers of the workshop are Fridolin Wild, Ralf Klammer, Mikhail Forminik, but he's not here yet, and me, Ilona Buchem. And we are all members of the special interest group of Wearable Enhanced Learning at the European Association of Technology Enhanced Learning. And we have run a series of workshops since, it's a good question, I forgot since when we actually started, 2016 or even 15, around this time, I think. So it's been a couple of years that we have run workshops dedicated to wearable enhanced learning or wearable technologies for learning. And this year, because the conference is dedicated to the sustainable development theme, we want to focus on this and discuss with you and listen to presentations that address sustainable development or the goals of sustainable development through the application of wearable technologies for learning. This is our agenda. It should actually say something like this because we just adjusted this today. So we have time until 4 p.m. We are going to have a keynote presentation by Fridolin Wild, and then we have four paper presentations with Q&As. Then we're going to have a workshop. And because we started later than planned, half an hour later than planned, we decided to skip the break. So if you're free anyway to leave at any point for your bio break, whatever, but we just decided to keep the schedule and finish at 4. So there will be no break before the workshop. The workshop will be a bit shorter, and then we want to end the workshop with the agenda sharing, wrap up, maybe some topics for workshop next year, and we will hopefully end at 4 as planned. And we start with a presentation of our book that we published together with people involved in the special interest group. The book is called Perspectives on Wearable Enhanced Learning, WELL, Current Trends, Research and Practice. And you can see it's a rather extensive view on wearable enhanced learning from the perspective of the evolution of technologies for learning through different theoretical frameworks, didactical frameworks, user experience design, research in this area, the data collected in different research studies, and the book finishes with synopsis and prognosis for the future, which also addresses the topics of sustainable development that we're going to discuss today. Just to give you a short overview of what you find in the book, and some chapters that you will see here are authored by the persons who are going to present today or present here in today's session. We have in part 1, Evolution Ecology of Wearable Enhanced Learning, a chapter which is dedicated to an overview of how things have evolved until now, until Technology Enhanced Learning 4.0, which is characterized by disintermediation, as we called it. And we kind of outlined in this chapter the different technologies, the different wearables with the 3 key categories: head-mounted displays, e-textiles, and smart accessories. Then we have interesting chapters in part 2 on the topography of wearable enhanced learning, for example, with focus on the needs of individuals with disabilities, such as vision impaired people. And you see here an example of a smart glass that produces text-to-speech, and also some other interesting examples of multi-team system learning supported by wearables, for example, in context of firefighters and emergency medical services. That's the other chapter. In part 3, which is about technological frameworks, development and implementation, we have some very interesting frameworks for IoT, and that's a chapter that was authored by Dan, who's here today, and his colleague Gila Kurtz. And we also have another chapter about IoT in the context of wearables and the different sensors, for instance, and use cases for this. In part 4, pedagogical frameworks, didactical considerations, we have a chapter that is dedicated to embodied learning and, for instance, how e-textiles can be used in physical rooms to support learning. And that's here an example of e-textiles on the 3 sofas that you can see in the figure 5, and some didactical frameworks or learning design or instructional design frameworks like 4CID applied in the WeKit project to designing wearable enhanced learning. In part 5, design of user experience, we have some interesting examples of using wearables in smart city learning, for example, supporting emergency medical teams with wearable sensors, proximity sensors, and another example from the WeKit project in context of aircraft, bioimaging, and astronaut training. Another part, which is research and data, gives an overview of some empirical data and studies that were conducted with different devices, like, for instance, the Samsung Gear or the Mayo armband. And one of those articles is authored by Eva, who is here today, and the other one by Fridolin, who is also here today. And finally, we have the synopsis prognosis part with a chapter about the bigger picture of wearables and how do they fit into the landscape of technologies for learning, with some critical issues like who owns the technologies, how is it going to develop in the future, and who are really the target groups of these technologies, how can we apply them to increase value and improve learning of people that really can benefit from these technologies, especially in educational field, but also in the medical field, and for different groups, not only students, but also, for instance, older people and so on. So this was a brief overview of our book. We wanted to start with this because the authors, the presenters today were involved in this, and we were not sure if people participating were aware of this. So you're more than welcome to check the book. It's available online. And we will continue now with keynote from Fridolin. And yeah, I'm going to make you to a co-host. I'm not quite sure if you already are a co-host. Let me see. If you well, you should be able to share participants. Fridolin is a co-host. It should be possible now.
Good. Should be coming through. Let me know when you can actually see it.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Good. I thought I will speak to you about learning in the real world, something that is close to my heart. And that's actually what we're trying to achieve with wearable computing in the one or other form. Working in my lab at the Institute of Educational Technology of the Open University. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because shift happens, because job profiles are changing. The way the workforce is composed is changing. That also means the way upper level management is organized is changing. There are gray collar jobs more and more in the future. And that, of course, then means the mindset in general also needs to shift with regards to more emphasis, even more emphasis than in previous years on lifelong learning and further development and other types of skills. Luckily, at the same time, shift happens as well in technology enhanced learning. We have been going through 4 waves, as I see it, Intel, from the invention of email and the natural extension to sharing material via that, to the phase of Tell to Zero scaling, where VLEs, learning management systems, were invented and allowed to deliver instruction at much bigger scale than you could with bulletin board services or email, to then culminate in the latest wave, Tell 3.0, of adaptation, where I think the most successful example that probably anyone here in the room has used is Duolingo, with adaptation to which words you forget and where you have difficulties in your grammar and things like that. Now we're entering this new phase, I think, in which, carried by this revolution in personal computing, we will see completely different types of learning applications, learning in the real world, as I call it, with disintermediation, where the medium becomes invisible. We're no longer tied into having screens. We can use projection on any object in our surrounding and work with that in therefore unprecedented ways. So that also has an implication for education. That means education will, in my opinion, open up to technical qualifications that previously have been more practically trained with apprenticeships and looking over the shoulder and approaches such as that. But now that we are lifting the barriers of what's possible, I mean, we only have two shoulders. We can, with wearable computing, now deliver education at scale also in these pre-bachelor levels. And that is certainly something that I think will happen over the coming years, at least here in the UK. So what are these advances in wearable computing that make this shift possible on both layers regarding skills as well as regarding the technology that can be used to deliver them at scale? From where wearable computing has begun, we have come very far. History says the invention of the wearable computer is probably attributable to Edward Thorp, who, together with Claude Shannon, whom we know for information theory, for example, invented in the end of 50s, beginning of 60s, a roulette cheating machine that they would wear in a shoe and tap with the toe when the roulette ball would hit a specific marking on the board to then have increased likelihood of predicting where it will actually land. So statistically, the system just worked a little bit better. And Edward Thorp claims to this day that he actually made enough money to reinvest it, and some of his wealth today would stem from that time. This is what it looked like. Quite similar to today's Arduino experiments, although with the subtle difference, I think, if we would walk like that into a casino in the Sierra Nevada, we would probably not come out alive again. From there, a few other milestones. Steve Mann's wearable computing group at the MIT is certainly something that has contributed to today's success of smart glasses, and Steve Mann is advising the one or other startup company on how to get them better and better. If you have some time and want to humor yourself about the annals of wearable computing, please do look up Steve Mann's stories about iTap and how he was assaulted in a Paris-based McDonald's, people trying to rip off the device that was drilled into his skull and things like that. Yeah, so according to Mann, wearable computing is about data processing attached in a system attached to the body, where you then have multiple different types of outputs that support you somewhat in, how I say, in augmenting your performance. So, is that the new fashion? No, certainly not. That's not where the field has stopped, and as many computer science revolutions, especially with regards to hardware, they go through the normal cycles that first breakthroughs are needed hardcore on the systems level, and then the usability and user experience follows. And that's, I think, where we currently are. That this has caught up, and we find at least 3 different types of wearable computing. We find head-mounted displays, smart glasses, from the level of powerful computers to the level of fashion elements. The North, for example, is bringing out a new set of focal glasses that are almost indistinguishable from regular glasses. There are a lot of smart accessories around, Fitbits and Jawbones and the like, and more, and I think that's going to happen over the coming few years. We are seeing more and more e-textiles. So either integrated into a textile, or the computer being the textile. So just to say that clearly, so Old school wearable computing, I think, is more accessorized. New school wearable computing is then more like the Levi's jacket that they have prototyped with Google Jacquard, with the Jacquard project, like we see here. And let me just jump somewhere here to the key points. Yeah, you see the interaction integrated into the garment. And the like. But there are many more examples of these new school smart textiles that you can find out there, from the yoga shirt to armbands to whatever. Yeah, what is different? They use smart textiles that are coming, use either textiles as a carrier. That's what you would do in rapid prototyping, integrating off-the-shelf electronic components. Or you have then indeed integrated sensors or actuators, like motors integrated into fabric that buzz and alert you to something, or like motion capture sensors, for example, that allow you to interact in a completely new way. Stretchable fabrics that change their resistance depending on how far they have been stretched. And yeah, then ultimately there are indeed quite some projects that have really integrated fabrics, integrated logic boards that are made out of fabric. The big changer, I think, in general for this new class of disintermediating wearable computing is the context awareness, that applications are no longer just relying on the information displays being somewhere and delivering information to the user, but that the computing architecture becomes aware of the user surrounding environment and reacts to it. So for TEL, for technology enhanced learning, what has made these latest breakthroughs in particular possible is, of course, the ability to create bespoke garments that have a function in learning. On the left, you see a generic example of one of my favorites from Georgia Tech's Wearable Computing Center. This is a circuit board embroidery. So with conductive threads integrated into the garment. This here is some sort of slider that you activate. There are a couple of buttons. By bridging with your finger the two silver threads embroidered here, you are pressing the button. On the right, you see in the background from our Wicked project, some prototyping work we did in workshops with end users on how to place specific sensors used in learning and training onto the mannequin here. And from there, then we did some fashion experiments as well. What also has changed, I think, is in particular computer vision's ability to map the environment in real time. Spatial computing is now possible not only on expensive devices such as the Magic Leap or such as the Microsoft HoloLens 1 and 2, but also on later generation mobile phones. The list is quite long of devices that support ARKit and ARCore, and they make things like this here possible. You can map in real time the environment and work with it. Secondly, I think rendering quality has changed significantly. We can today create visual illusions on smart glasses, for example, that look real, that we're accepting as a believable reality. And yeah, also the smart glasses hardware has become more fancy and more usable. To pick a few examples of this learning in the real world, I brought a couple of things I was involved with, starting off here in 2014, where we used a, well, in that case, it was placed on the table, a sensor, leap motion finger sensor, but we currently work with a vendor that is a new startup company that is doing that with a glove-based system. We used these expert hands mapped into the user's visual field to deliver hands-on tutoring. And from there, the idea was not far-fetched to create a, in that case, it's only a smart glasses-based solution to capture the indoor position of the user. but be able to record what the expert does and then make it replayable by trainees a gazillion times using the same wearable device. So here we see the recording of like
accumulated discharge pressure
of an expert.
It is 600 within limits.
In a little while,
close the panel
you
again.
will see the same procedure, what it looks like to the trainee from the perspective of the trainee. This is a standard check procedure done on any airplane when it comes in for servicing.
Okay,
so here we can see now the reconstituted ghost delivered on the wearable display, speaking with the voice of the expert and allowing you to really step into the footsteps and have a million users in parallel that can look over the shoulders of the expert.
Close the panel again.
Yeah. We have extended that, of course, with a
Watch
fully
your step while performing the task.
fletching system that can deliver instruction in various ways, not just using this ghost track. So here a brief insight in the system that we tested
Okay.
on a physical surface simulator of Mars.
First find the control
How
panel.
to train
Then
astronauts on
activate rover
specific
brakes by
maintenance
removing
operations on a rover.
control panel.
You see all those elements floating in space. That would be the shimmering holograms that are in the room with you while you see the real object still. And it's adaptive and many other things. So I'm jumping over that to show you the latest example of the ghost that we took a little bit further. So we extended, you can see here on the left, a wearable harness with also 2 motion capture units for the spine position and 2 armbands integrated that sense where the forearm position is, even when it's not visible by the cameras. And that way, a user can very quickly create an expert ghost track, record it, and ship it to whoever wants to use it. Yeah. So you've seen here now a range of different examples using accessories, using fabric integrated sensors, and using smart glasses that give you a good impression. What, in my view, makes success for wearable computing applications in support of learning? One key thing is to go away from being object-centric. So go away from one function tools, go away from one object devices, and see that we can do something else than the Coke bottle overlay. As exciting as it is for branding, this is not what we need in learning. In learning, we need proper instructional design support. Here is a set of things that we developed in the Weekend project. And we need to do it in an activity-centric way so that learning is embedded in meaningful learning activities and not centered around artifacts. What also needs to change, I think, and will change in the near future is the kind of breakthrough with regards to 3D content creation. We need to have more reusable 3D learning objects, some of which have to be created with immense effort. On the right, for example, you see the insight into the capturing studio used for the HoloPatient, created by Pearson Immersive that you see below here. That's a volumetric capturing studio filming an actor who is playing symptoms, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. On the left, you see from my own group some experiments in capturing holographic AIs, or capturing first 3D character models that then can be rigged and animated and filled with a bit of intelligence so you can actually have a meaningful learning dialogue with them. So the one here on the left is from a training application for cancer surgery survivors, teaching them how to work out, depending on their condition, BMI, and other things. Yeah. So it still is expensive to create good quality 3D content, but at the same time, it is also more and more of a repository thing. And I think there are so many startup companies at the moment at the start with regards to volumetric capturing repositories and approaches for cheap are becoming available, as well as sharing existing ones. And the tech world has closed up to that I think inherent need to share things more socially than we have. One should not forget, for example, that the compressed GLTF format, that's like a GIF for the web for 3D, is only, I think the first version came out December 2015, and the updated version with animations embedded was 2017. So these are all fairly young things. Streaming volumetric video, as we see here, the ability to stream that over the web with compression, that's being made as we speak. Streaming forwards don't yet fully exist, and there's a lot of research going on about that. We will see in a short time a similar success, I'm sure, as we've seen in the video world with MPEG. What also is possible and therefore has changed is the way the learning activities can be expressed with standards. And that is one that I have been leading, the standards working group for augmented reality learning experience models. That's a fully fledging workflow standard that allows to describe these learning activities, and then the missing bits that typical workflow models don't have, meaning the binding to the real world that allows to superimpose information on the objects where they are actually needed and work with visibility of objects in the user's environment. This way, I expect now, and can see that the industry activity is already catching up with it, that authoring of learning content is maybe in a year or two time no longer a question of specialist tools and skills, maybe no longer tied into a specific platform and runs on any device, can integrate with existing sensors and many, many more things. Yeah, from the research we've done in the past, we know this is worth pursuing because holographic guidance further relaxes constraints on time and space. It allows us also to link directly from performance to the underlying competence, or from the competence that is supposed to be developed to its actual performance. For example, we can use in RLM the Experience API to track and log whether someone dismantled this nose wheel of an airplane in a specific amount of time, beating the house record, or whether there has been enough practice as evidence in the XAPI attached to the learning management system. It also has the potential, when applied right, to drastically reduce the training time required, because you can rehearse things on the fly and quickly. Our partners active in space, for example, tell us that with technologies like these, Mars missions only become possible. At the moment, training for a mission on the ISS takes about 2 to 3 years for a 6-month mission, and that would increase to an estimated 6 years if you're going for a 2 to 3 year mission to Mars. Furthermore, at the moment with ISS and Moon, it's still possible to receive ground support where you need it, because the communication is reasonably fast. With the distance to Mars, the communication delay is at best 25 minutes or thereabouts. So that is something that is no longer possible and requires therefore a paradigm change in the way learning is delivered, and requires a lot more autonomy in comparison to what currently is prevalent in such a high-tech area. Yeah, and that applies to many other industries as well. So even the space is a bit remote and strange. It is something that is symptomatic of a lot of these jobs that are at risk of being replaced by robots. Furthermore, our trials, for example, the one in the medical field with radiologists, have shown us that this wearable computing approach can fundamentally disrupt teaching as we know it. And in particular, it can fundamentally disrupt how these things currently are produced. At the moment, it still is the case if you want to do a wearable computing application, an AR application using wearable computing, you hire a team of specialists to deliver. And, with the approaches that I've just demonstrated you, this can be directly put into the hands of instructional designers rather than specialists in software engineering or design, helping to significantly reduce production costs. So, summing up, exciting times, very exciting times, and I would be very surprised if in the future we wouldn't see some programmatic learning in the real world approach, where we link competence directly to performance, embed theory in practice, focus strongly on skills, and do that in a way that it's cost efficient and at scale. And that maybe means that we have to get our act together and help create an educational AR cloud, so that wearable learning activities can be shared more easily, and that the bits and bobs required to execute them in the real world are becoming more accessible to others, like sharing of 3D spatial maps of camping and seminar rooms and other things, and not leave that only to industry or some industry giant to charge us in the future for. This way, I think we can achieve contactless, remote, real-time, diverse performance augmentation. And with that, I thank you for your attention and open to further questions.
Thank you. I gave you a virtual applause. Fridolin, everybody is welcome to do the same. Thank you for the keynote. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So anybody who wants to ask a question, you cannot raise the hand in Zoom, but you can write in the chat, and maybe you can just directly activate your microphone, I think.
I would be interested to hear whether you agree, whether you think this will happen, this revolution in personal computing. Will we still be sitting in front of a computer screen in 5 years? Do we train people still in a classroom, or is the classroom a thing of the past? When you think of your university education, do you think we will still just be sitting in lecture halls, or will this be complemented by other activity, and how dominant will it be?
I think Dan has a comment.
Yeah, hello. So first of all, thank you for your interesting talk. It was interesting. And as for your question, I would take, I don't think that the question is necessarily technological. There is a famous educational researcher, you ask about classrooms. There is a famous educational researcher known as Gabriel Salomon, who mentioned about who is waving the the tail of the dog. Is it the technology, or is it the educational aspects? So the disappearance or the existence of the classrooms or the reasons for this would go would be much more prominent than just about the technological affordances. I would ask we as humans how easy or how hard it would be to get rid from the old habits of, for instance, learning in an official space, in a traditional classroom, inside the boundaries of the classroom. So I'm not so sure that we'll get rid so fast from our old habits as from the classrooms. I mean, the classroom as an official space might have also its own advantages. I think that the trick would be the seamless shift between the context, the spaces. So it would be also beyond the traditional boundaries of the classroom, and the technology, the role of the technology would be to make the fluence of this learning process more seamless. I mean, that's me. That's us.
Yes, some interesting voices in the community say that, of course, the classroom won't disappear. It will just be empty. Scott Galloway says, for example, that likely, especially now with COVID, and especially in the Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American world, we might see a small revolution universities teaming up with the big IT giants, because that's the only way those IT giants can still achieve shareholder value and growth. And in the future, the campus experience is for the few rich kids that can go to Oxford University, and the rest will have to rent it out to birthday parties as they already do.
Fridolin, we have another voice, Matthias.
Hi, I'm a computer science teacher myself. I stayed at the university after my degree, and now I'm in computer science didactics. And I think, at least here in Germany, your vision of the empty classroom is so far away. I'm not sure I will live to see that. I don't know if you know the current numbers of IT equipment in classrooms. Here, at least in Germany, I just looked it up again. 2/3 of the schools don't even have Wi-Fi. And during current Corona times, there are problems of schools. Well, they try to do distance learning, but around 20% of the students don't have a device at home to, at least a tablet, to access the materials. So I like your vision of the empty classroom for some subjects, not for all subjects. I think discussions in person and cooperation, collaboration are also important. But I see a strong future for vocational trainings. Some of the context you just displayed in your presentation, and I really liked it. I took a lot of notes because we just handed in a project draft to do the same in the e-mobility business, high voltage training for mechanical engineers and car engineers. And this is a field where I can envision a coverage of close to 100% of those going through such a vocational training. But to be honest, I don't see it in schools in the next 30 to 50 years.
That's interesting. It is, I think, for a reason that these areas had been neglected by higher education shamelessly over years. So that there is a big gap in how many jobs industry requires in these areas. Jobs, high-skilled jobs, white or gray-collar worker jobs, and how many are actually being produced by the educational system. And the kind of, funnily, the gap that is not filled is pretty much the same amount of people that are looking at becoming unemployed because of automation. It's obvious that it should happen, that we re-qualify people for better things, and we need an education system for that, to deliver that, which currently is not capable of doing that.
Yeah, but we are thinking of the classroom of the future, so I'm totally fine with that.
I also have a question, Fridolin. I was thinking about it. I thought it was very interesting that you said that there is a shift from object-oriented to activity-oriented design. We just had a workshop yesterday, and we were talking about modeling competencies. And we basically, when modeling competencies, you have a basic structure where the verb and the object are always the key components. And I was just thinking that the object itself is actually also part of the competency in competency modeling, and so part of an activity. So I just wonder how you are thinking about this shift. How does this exactly or practically can happen in designing?
A good point. So I'm only a practitioner here myself, so I've noticed that when we design AR learning activities, then other things become accessible for predicates and objects than previously. We're no longer tied into kind of indirectly figuring out whether something is contained in a video or in a text, because we have access to what people are doing in the real world. And I think that's very powerful. And I think we're only at the beginning. I can see in our discussions and research projects how difficult it actually is for people selling learning content in that area to delve into this field and understanding how you would model subject predicate object triples. And I hear voices such as, yeah, well, we need a data engineer for this. And like, no, we just need to understand what your kids' parents would like to see analytics-wise, and then we're good. But at the moment, I'm not really aware of good guidance in the standardization working group for the XAPI. There is a tag group that discusses how we could get better at describing vocabulary profiles and things and yada, yada, yada. But besides collecting good practice and making it available, I haven't seen much. And the good practice is still very much at the beginning. So there are excellent profiles for tracking users' video watching behavior. There is no profile really for how you would monitor people in a workshop.
Okay, let's see. Are there any questions to Fridolin? We still have 2 more minutes, but if there are no questions, we can also move on.
Yeah, perhaps I can also say a little bit out of our practice at our university. So I haven't been in any classroom recently, yeah. So, and I'm teaching a lab on mixed reality technologies, yeah. So, and I couldn't imagine to do that without having my students in the classroom and experiencing wearable technology with them. So like we have the HTC Vive, we have the HoloLens, yeah. So we have a lot of tools, but yeah, due to the Corona and hard thinking about an hygiene concept for the HoloLens, yeah, so we doing this lab course completely online, yeah. So and that it was really tough, yeah. So and I think it's not a thing I want to repeat every year. So I totally agree. So for some subjects, like lab courses and so on, yeah. So you should have people in class, and experiencing technologies together is a very valuable experience. Yeah. The same is true for my son, who started to study chemistry. Yeah? So he spent most of the time this summer in the labs, the chemistry labs, and they had also a hygiene concept. Yeah. So and I think here the same. Yeah. So practical experience, it's key. Yeah. So in wearable technology, I can't imagine a future without experiencing technology, yeah. So it would be for Fridolin, yeah. So in particular with wearable technology, it's extremely challenging task to make everything online. That would be my comment for now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think Mikhail also wants to say something.
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. I want to follow up on the comments by Fridolin and Matthias, I think. You were talking about re-educating people during the pandemic. And that's exactly what I am involved now. Just came from the lecture where we run a course in the university, specifically targeting well-educated people who lost their jobs because of the pandemic. And the course is about augmented reality and other immersive technologies and their use and their integration into the organizational processes. So we have different specialists from different government organizations and private companies there. The biggest challenge, I think, is that the managers of all other areas, not only education, and also the specialists who work, professionals who work on day-to-day tasks, they only now see that the digitalization process is starting here and there, and that technologies such as augmented reality can be part of that, and they have very little understanding of how that could even start to be considered. So their digitalization is maybe about 10, 15 years behind their personal use of digital technology. So if we started using personal computers so many years ago, and only now they are starting to integrate that into teaching. So I think augmented reality might not come to the classroom first or to education, but it would come to other areas that are on the front of digitalization and innovation. I think talking about a classroom specifically, which is the most traditional form, I think, of education is a bit misleading. We can talk about generally the training industry and in the bigger context of digitalization of the entire society. Then we can have very different timeframes, not 30, 50 years, but I mean, yesterday.
I'm not sure I agree. I think it's a question of political mindset and what we put on the agenda. I think at the moment it is possible that a government would decide, okay, we bring smart glasses to all schools. We do this as an investment. Similar way we have in the past decided to bring iPads or broadband to classrooms. And I'm fully aware that all of these initiatives were technology support initiatives and have miserably failed on the pedagogical level. And there's certainly something to be learned from that. At the same time, I think to push a rollout across society forward, universities and schools can be an excellent vehicle for that. So it's, I think, up to a government to lead the way and push things forward. And I'm doing mine to convince the people here in the UK. I think you should also write a letter to your Prime Minister.
Okay, let's see what the future will bring. Thank you again for the keynote, Fridolin. And let's continue with the first presentation. I think I'm going to actually stop the recording